Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
It's good to have you back.
Good to be back.
You had a nice respite.
Yeah, man. It's important to take a little time away. And this is maybe the longest we've gone. How long is it? It's like 10 days without talking to you?
It has been 10 days, but it's been a while since you had a break. I mean, you didn't do the typical vacay during the pandemic, if I recall, right?
Yeah, we've done some road trips here and there, but I feel like you and I have at least texted. This time it was like...
It was total silence.
Radio silence.
Right.
We needed some space. I hate to admit that I was doing other, video conferencing with other men.
I just watched it's not a new special, but there's a Sarah Silverman Netflix special, A Speck of Dust, which was really, I don't know if you're a Sarah Silverman fan.
I like her okay. I was on Real Time with her once. She was very nice. Very nice.
She's very blunt about abortion, so you might not care for that part of the special.
Yeah, I don't think her comedy is my cup of tea, but she was very nice in person.
She's politically incorrect enough that I think you would enjoy a lot of it.
Well, she is. I mean, she was just on Bridget Fettis's podcast. I haven't listened or seen it yet, but she is one of these people who, wasn't she like canceled or threatened? She's kind of against cancel culture, I think.
I think like other comedians,
yeah,
there's a little bit of a hesitancy towards cancel culture since they traffic in a lot of line crossing.
I think she did blackface or something.
I think there was something like that in one of her old shows. I don't remember the details. Anyway, so she had a bit where she's like it's a real story. She had a life-threatening emergency a few years ago, and she's telling the story about it, and she was being wheeled off away from her boyfriend, and she said her boyfriend and her have a standard thing when they have to say goodbye, the elevator doors are closing. She says, "I want to see other people."
Well, there you go. And by the way, there was another. Not only did you see other people, but you couldn't even go outside the name Matt.
That's true. I had to stay within the bounds of Matt's to keep in my comfort zone. If I talk to a non-Matt, it's going to feel just not quite right.
We should have a list of people that we probably couldn't be with, like a fantasy list. But if we got them, if we landed them, then you would give me like a hall pass to have them on the DMZ. By the way, speaking of these sort of infidelity is the wrong word, but there's a TV show coming out called the DMZ. Do you know about this?
No. We should sue.
I feel like one of our viewers may be a litigious, powerful attorney, and maybe we have a case.
Maybe this could be our windfall. This could be our HuffPost gold mine.
I am not above engaging in frivolous lawsuits if we have a case. I don't know. I think with the name of things, you could name something anything, right? Like it's not. I think names of shows are pretty much like there were two shows called ER, both starring George Clooney. Did you know that?
I did not know. I didn't know the second one.
One was a comedy.
When was that?
In like the 80s.
Huh.
But
the show was already done.
It was the comedy ER, starring George Clooney, came first, and it was a very short-lived sitcom that lasted 15 minutes, and then of course there was the other ER. This is my recollection. I could be totally misremembering.
The Facts of Life is not ER; those are different shows.
Yes, that's true, and he was on that too as George.
That's right. And he was on Roseanne. He was on the factory floor of Roseanne.
Yeah, he doesn't scream blue collar Michigan worker to me, but I guess he had a mullet back then, so I think it worked.
Anyway, so I think you saw, Matt, after the J&J vaccine pause occurred yesterday morning, I was one of the first casualties My 10:20 a.m. appointment yesterday was canceled just about an hour after the FDA CDC announcement, which made me very unhappy in the morning. But I collected myself. I got my bearings. I got my anti-government libertarian rantings out privately, and then returned to the fold to praise our great public servants, and wrote a piece about it for the Washington Monthly, which came out this morning. So I don't know if you had a chance to look at that yet.
No, I haven't read it yet, which is actually helpful for our cause here, because then I can question you like someone who has not read it. So am I correct? You are still unprotected. You are unvaccinated.
Correct. So I was I just got the J&J appointment. So in Massachusetts, everybody's eligible as of the 19th, but they really weakened or loosened the pre-existing health condition criteria. So it used to be you needed two medical conditions, and they lowered it to one, and they made one of them being slightly overweight. So that's a huge catch-all for a whole slew of people, including myself.
No, don't tell. You don't qualify.
Yeah, oh yeah, I do.
No way.
I mean, it's based on BMI, body mass index, and I forget what my actual BMI is, but I'm roughly 20 pounds overweight based on the BMI.
That's absurd.
Standard. So I qualify on those grounds, and.
We need to close that loophole, Bill. The BMI loophole.
It's working in my favor right now. So I was able.
Do you get to park in special places too, Bill? Do you get one of those little signs to open your
get a free scooter? Get a free scooter to go around the grocery store with.
Fat middle-aged dad.
I learned from a friend that our local Walmart had J&J vaccines, and I wanted J&J. I mean, I wasn't being picky about it. I was going to go wherever the appointment was. But I was hoping to get a J&J, one and done. Last week I checked it. There were no appointments. I checked it 30 minutes later. There was an appointment. So I was like, yeah, I snagged it. It's all working. Everything's, working my way. Stars are aligned. And then even yesterday, I got a text reminder at 8 o'clock in the morning that the appointment was on. 20 minutes later, get a phone call that we're canceled. So,
thanks, Obama.
Exactly. Now,
okay. So everybody says this is BS because there are like 6 cases of blood clots. And by the way, you are now vulnerable. Like the odds that people like you, I won't say you, aren't the odds greater? A, that on the way to get your vaccine, you get hit by a bus. B, that by not being vaccinated, you get COVID and die. Aren't the odds of that greater than the odds of you getting this blood clot that I think
there was a lot of that armchair cost-benefit analysis going on social media yesterday. And believe me, these things crossed my mind as well, wanting my vaccine. And I did a little bit of a deeper dive, which means like I actually listened to the press briefing that the FDA and CDC held.
You mean unlike what I'm doing right now?
Right. I also heard Scott Gottlieb, who was Trump's FDA commissioner, who's actually on the Pfizer board, but he did an interview on CNBC yesterday. And so first here's some of the extra information. Then we can get into sort of the ethics of it all, cost benefit of it all. So you have 6 known blood clot episodes. We don't know if there are only 6. There's just 6 reported. And so part of the issue is finding out, are there more? Remember, J&J vaccines have only been distributed as of the first week of March. And the blood clots were materializing about 1 to 2 weeks afterwards. So, we have more and more vaccines every week. So we don't know how many more are going to show up a week or 2 from now. We don't know how many have already happened, but just weren't reported. As Scott Gottlieb said, we've learned about these severe ones. Maybe there's some more mild ones that are out there that we want to know about, because you want that data to help determine, is this a causal connection or not? So there's that scientific need. Now, you could say, well, that doesn't require a pause. You could still collect the data as things are going on. The other part of the issue is that the type of clot is not a typical clot, and the treatment for it is not what doctors are normally taught to use for a typical blood clot. So they need to get the information to the doctors. Hey, if you come across this particular kind of blood clot, don't treat it the way you're used to. And plus, we also want to get the data to find out, what I mean, I'm not the doctor here, so excuse me if I'm not getting this quite right. I don't know if they need to learn more about these specific clots to help with the treatment recommendations. So I think all that combined argued for the pause, so we're not inadvertently creating more blood clots that are unbeknownst yet that might get treated wrongly, leading to unnecessary deaths. Now, you still could say, okay, well, how many people is that? It still isn't that many people. And so what's the downside harm in doing it this way? And this, I think, is the bigger ethical question. So there are a lot of times that government officials, public health officials or otherwise, have to make decisions where no matter what you do, somebody dies. It's a question of trying to minimize harm. But I think it's more complicated than just a body count number. There's the question of who would be directly responsible for the deaths. If the government knows there's a potential blood clot issue, downplays it, actively encourages the vaccine use, and then more people die from the blood clots, well, the government is more directly responsible for those deaths. So here's my situation. I lost my vaccine appointment. I was able to get another vaccine appointment for Pfizer. So I had my first dose Friday and my second dose 3 weeks from then. So I'm not considered fully vaccinated until May 21st, whereas I would have been fully vaccinated April 27th.
Can I let me just jump in and ask a quick question.
Yeah.
Did they facilitate, because you lost the J&J appointment?
You
had to proactively.
I had to hustle for it. And Walmart was going to do my J&J. They didn't have any other vaccines. So just like, we'll be in touch, maybe. And then it was, going online, finding out about a thing here, a thing there, striking out, lucking out.
Right.
In Massachusetts,
so you could potentially have people
not getting new appointments
who are not gonna, because now, well, maybe they were on the fence. I don't know if this person exists, right? Maybe the kind of people who were on the fence weren't signed up to begin with, but it's at least plausible that somebody in your shoes now says, well, we'll let it slide. I want to check.
Well, maybe they're worried. Maybe they're worried about the safety of it.
Yeah.
There's also just, look, I was able, I work from home. I work on my computer. I can click things, my day. I'm not on a construction site where I'm not in front of a computer. Now, the way I finally got it was actually not when I was home. I was actually in my car, so waiting to pick up my kid from school. I wasn't in the middle of driving. I was idle.
I can attest to the fact that Bill has a rigorous system in place where if you text him while he's driving, you immediately get a bounce back saying that he's driving. Yes. And he won't text you.
Right. So there's a guy in Massachusetts who created a Twitter bot that posts a tweet every time there's a new appointment available in Massachusetts. And you can set your Twitter notifications so you get pinged on your phone when a new tweet is up. So I got a ping that there were vaccines available in the neighboring city. And while I was waiting for my kid to leave school, I then, clicked the link and then got the appointment on the phone. So I had the ability to do that. Some other people don't have their schedules that would allow for that kind of thing. So some people might not get an appointment as readily as I did. Even though I got a ready appointment, there's still a delay when I'll be considered fully vaccinated. Now, some people might argue I'll have some protection after the first shot, and maybe that protection is somewhat akin to what I would get through the J&J. But I'm sure it's generally true. But there's going to be outliers. Somebody might get COVID in the interim between when they would have had a J&J shot and when they got one scheduled for later or didn't get it at all. That could happen to somebody somewhere. To those people, if I get COVID between now and May 21st, It's because I did something that I shouldn't be doing. I didn't social distance properly. I didn't wear my mask properly. I didn't sanitize my hands properly. I was not operating in accordance with other government communication that I had received telling me what I should be doing with myself. I have more responsibility.
Slut shaming and victim shaming and victim blaming.
It's just a fact. I mean, I will have done something wrong if I am going, and I carry more responsibility for that circumstance than if the government encouraged a vaccine that led to a blood clot when they knew there was a blood clot issue.
Daddy,
yes,
can I say hi?
Yeah?
Hello, buy Bill Scher's book. Wait, don't move to Canada. It was on Jeopardy.
Bill, that's
good job. Good job.
This exploitation has to end. Using your child to shamelessly self-promote your book.
He was saying I was shamelessly exploiting you to sell my book. So anyway, I think it's a more complicated question than just the numbers. There's a question of responsibility involved. And now, look, I think the Biden administration might get hit very hard if there are a handful of COVID deaths of people who had their J&J appointments canceled. They're not without political vulnerability by taking this action. But I can understand why they took the action that they did for those reasons.
Yeah. Well, there's also, you alluded to this, but we should maybe state it fully, which is the vaccine shyness or whatever it's called. It may not just be people who had their appointment canceled, but other people now have, they canceled. Maybe these things aren't that safe. So there could be repercussions.
There could be, but I would think, again, there's no perfect way to handle this. But if there was a blood clot issue that the government downplayed that got worse, I think that would be a much more damaging to governmental credibility on vaccines why they handle it now. They're saying, look,
I agree, but you're assuming that they would downplay it. They shouldn't downplay it.
Well, and
they should be transparent, and this should be publicly known, transparent, but then they could still go with the science and the math, which I think would suggest, full speed ahead.
Well, but I think if you're saying full speed ahead, you're in some way downplaying. You're downplaying it relative to what they did. Having a pause is a more serious step to take than saying we have this blood clot issue, but go ahead and still get it.
I think you could say this issue happened. This is how many. This is why we're continuing to go forward. But be advised, there is a small. But look, everything we do in life has some chance. Like driving your kids to school, like whatever it is, there is you're incurring some risk in every decision you make, and the question is it the cost benefit analysis? But I don't think you should hide it or downplay it. I think you should be honest about it, and the honest appraisal is this is not statistically worth pulling the plug on J&J.
Well, remember, and look, I think there's certainly a point here that there is no absolute correct answer here. There is a managing of different risks, and you have to make a judgment call at the end of the day. I think in this case, we have Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, much more so than J&J already. I mean, that the lion's share of the vaccines out there are Pfizer and Moderna, so it's not like the government's saying don't get vaccinated. They're saying don't get this particular vaccine, go get the other vaccine. So that's also part of the decision-making process. So one of the points in my article was that this speaks to the larger posture of the Biden administration and people's analyses of what they have been doing, what they should be doing. There's been a lot of talk over the past, 2-3 months. This is a big and bold administration, and this is the right political tack. They should be delivering for people. They should do good things, popular things, and be competent. And if you do that, that's going to pay off. Don't trim your sails. Don't water things down for mythical bipartisanship. They're going to produce weaker legislation, less effective policies, just to appease, a handful of, annoying pundits like Bill Scher. And I think, look, do popular good things and be competent is a perfectly fine adage ideal to aspire to. The problem is that there are lots of decisions that you make when you're in power that don't have obvious popular good versus unpopular bad choices. You have lots of complicated choices where someone's going to be unhappy no matter what you do. And if you're putting out utopian expectations, people are going to be very dissatisfied. So I talk about Ezra Klein in my piece. So Ezra Klein's one of these people who said at the front end, Biden shouldn't act like Obama. He should be big, bold. The pandemic is a crisis and an opportunity. Handle this in a competent way. The rewards will be great. And then more recently saying, the Biden team might be being too timid. They're approaching things in kind of a conventional way, and that might be harming our response. And it's not like the criticism is wholly invalid, but the point is that there's more than one way to look at a situation that different competent people might disagree on what to do. And there's not going to be one singular way that makes everybody happy. And I think that's the situation where we are right now. We're bumping up into the realities of governing where there's difficult choices, imperfect choices, and there's going to be some dissatisfied people. And the worse the Biden team and Biden's allies do in managing those expectations, you might get more and more higher degrees of dissatisfaction.
So just to put a bow on this, you were somebody who was personally impacted by this decision.
Yeah.
At first, you were upset.
Yeah.
And now you've come to basically see it as you understand it was a tough choice and you're at least okay with the decision. Is that right?
Yeah. I don't feel like a bunch of numbnuts screwed me. I mean, I'm still not happy. I would have rather gotten my vaccine.
Wait, no. Let me ask this. Knowing the potential for blood clot, you would have rather gotten the vaccine still?
Sure, I would have rather gotten it, yeah. I mean, I imagine that risk is very, very low. If we're going to take a libertarian approach to it, if I was given the choice to do it, I'd probably do it. But I understand it's not just about me, and it's not just about odds. If 20 more people died from a blood clot that didn't have to die, while I had to wait one extra month to be considered fully vaccinated and do my other social distancing protocols in that period, I understand that trade-off, even though it's annoying for me.
You know what the interesting thing is? We had a similar discussion a year ago or 10 months ago or whatever, when a lot of conservatives were saying, look, there's inherent risk in everything, and so let's open everything back up. And, and maybe some old people are going to die, but overall, the cost-benefit analysis, we're going to all be better off. And so, and I think I know I personally was very critical of conservatives who were making those sort of calculations. You know what I mean? And but it is interesting that when you are in the business of government, you try to be ethical and you try to be compassionate, but at some level, the decisions you make are really have huge consequences, and oftentimes they are like these kind of judgment calls where you weigh things. So,
and mind you, what the FDA and the CDC said, they didn't ban J&J vaccines. They didn't say you're not allowed to use them anymore. They said, we recommend a pause. Walmart could have given it to me. They were legally allowed to give it to me. Walmart made the decision to deny me. And obviously,
now we're into a different topic about private companies.
That's right. That's right.
Private. Like this leads us to Major League Baseball and Google and all sorts of other topics that we shouldn't go down a rabbit hole discussing.
Well, I think we should. I mean, there's this piece in Politico today about is Biden going to exploit this falling out between corporate America and the Republican Party? Mitch McConnell lashed out at Delta Coca-Cola for abandoning Georgia in the All-Star game and Major League Baseball, leaving moving the All-Star game to Colorado. You have Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley talking about ending Major League Baseball's antitrust exemption. And at the same time...
Which maybe they should do on the merits, but not as revenge.
You're right. I mean, these are the two premier critics of cancel culture literally saying, let's cancel Major League Baseball's antitrust exemption because we don't like what they did. We should... J.D. Vance, hillbilly elegy, who might run for Senate in Ohio, basically saying we should punish corporations with higher taxes because they're acting in a woke fashion. I mean, the conservatives have forever said, don't raise taxes on corporations because that's punitive and it's going to kill jobs. Well,
we also, that's one argument. The second point, though, is like, should the power of government be used to punish people who do things they don't like? I mean, that's very heavy.
You use fossil fuels, we're going to punish you with higher taxes. That government shouldn't do that. Government should intervene in your personal choices that way. But now,
well, I mean, I do think there's a distinction though between government. We talk about government picking winners and losers. It's one thing for government to favor certain behavior. Should government reward home ownership? Well, I don't know, but you could make an argument for it. Should government reward having kids or subsidize having kids? You could make an argument for it. That's picking winners and losers, but that's a little bit different than seeking revenge against people or business, and targeting them specifically. And the goal there is not to, I mean, it's a nuanced difference, but the goal is not to, reward or preference certain types of virtuous behavior or punish sin taxes. Mm-hmm. The government is actually to punish a specific company. I think there's a nuanced difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to justify. I'm against taxes on corporations for all these economic reasons and philosophical reasons, but if you express a political opinion I don't like, hell yeah, I'm going to punish you. That's the legitimate exception. It's crazy.
And I'm saying this as someone who thinks Major League Baseball made a huge mistake, and it also someone who's very bothered by the fact that sports has become politicized to begin with. But I also think it would be another mistake for Republicans to try to use their sway in government to punish them for political choices.
I mean, if I was Major League Baseball, I would keep the All-Star game in suburban Atlanta. It's Cobb County, but do a whole voting rights program before the game. Have a whole bunch of PSAs, encouraging early voting and mail balloting and criticizing voter suppression tactics and whatnot. I think there are ways to do this. I mean, in a way that didn't have the economic consequences for the locals who are not party to the decision.
Yeah. Well, look, while we're talking about Major League Baseball, I mean, I think there's. So you're making the argument, which I think you're correct, which is to say, if you believe the Georgia law is horrible and you want to be involved in woke, whatever, even just liberal politics, the best way to do that, to be effective, is I think what you just described, Bill. But there's the other point, which is actually the Georgia bill isn't Jim Crow 2.0. And then there's the other question from a business standpoint. And I think this is one of the things that irks Republicans. But now, look, it could be that Major League Baseball has decided they don't care about people like me, that their target audience is some other people. This is the replacement theory Tucker Carlson has been warning you about, by the way. But presumably, I would be the kind of person that Major League Baseball should want in their target demo. I mean, for crying out loud, I'm a Little League coach now, Bill, as you know. I'm an O's fan. I'm a baseball fan. I want to go watch a game and not think about politics. I want that to be my safe space, so to speak. My place to get away from this business. And this makes me like baseball a little bit less and want to go support Major League Baseball a little bit less. Just the fact that they're involved in politics to begin with. So it seems to me that baseball is making a decision that actually goes against their fan base and their business interests. And I think that Major League Baseball should be doing what Joe Biden did, which is ignore Twitter. I feel like they're listening to Twitter too much. But I still don't think we should try to punish them. Now, look, they probably shouldn't have this special antitrust exemption anyway. But to do it based on revenge is not good.
I want to say a few things. First, number one, just for clarification's sake, I'm assuming, Matt Lewis, you're not endorsing Tucker Carlson's replacement theory, correct?
Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, check.
Two, I would totally keep the antitrust exemption, and I would leverage it to lower ticket prices and make them family friendly.
Well, now we're talking about more governmental involvement.
If you're going to be a government-sanctioned monopoly, it should be for the public good. You should not be able to have $2,000 seats. These should be public service entities that are community building and accessible to the average family. That's my opinion. But to the
I remember you used to be able to go for on special nights and sit in the upper deck for $3.
Oh, I that's why I saw Yankee games up at the bleachers for $3. Yeah. We have terrible seats. There's no back to the bleacher seats, but you could take your family to the game, and that's a lot harder these days. Now you had the same attitude about disliking the intermingling of sports and politics with the NFL. And Colin Kaepernick and the kneeling and all that stuff, but you came back to football, didn't you? Your boycott did not last, right?
Not really, Bill. It didn't. No. I did not come back to football.
Oh, really? You've not watched football since?
No, I watched the Super Bowl.
Okay,
I've watched the Super Bowl.
You're not as loyal a watcher as you used to be.
No, I'm not. And it's not Colin Kaepernick specifically. It's a combination of things. I was a Redskins fan. Now they're the Washington football team or something. I feel like I was wasting my time on Sundays just sitting there like a couch potato watching.
That's the best reason not to watch football.
Yeah, so that's a legit. I feel happy. And I used to if the Redskins lost, it would ruin a couple days of my week. I'm not joking. I would be depressed and I would end up hours of my life devoted to this when I could have been focusing on my family, things that really matter. And then also, it's not specifically Colin Kaepernick, but it's the politicization of sports. Again, I want that to be my safe haven, the place where I go, where we all go together. The great thing about sports is that you could be a Republican and have a friend who's a Democrat, but if you were both Redskins fans, you could come together over that. You could talk about the game and without talking about politics. And, look, I know that there's a long history going, we could talk about Jackie Robinson. We could talk about Muhammad Ali. I mean, there's always been some degree of politics involved in sports. But by and large, it was a safe haven. And in recent years, it has not been that. So that has turned me off to I don't consume sports nearly as much as I used to. And you used to be able to watch baseball tonight. I don't care that Keith Olbermann was a flaming lefty. He was great at at ESPN, but they actually showed the games. I may also be becoming an old fuddy-duddy.
Well, I think this is part of the calculation on the part of Major League Baseball, which is, my guess is more than some of the other sports is they don't have as young a fan base. They need to replenish their fan base. They can't just cater to old fuddy-duddies. And so they need to show that they are culturally in sync with the younger generation who are more culturally progressive than older people. So I would imagine that has something to do with the decision making here. And I would have handled it differently. I think they could have shown support for voting rights without leaving Atlanta. But my guess is their calculation has an element of bottom line to it, which is we need to get more young people interested in this game and not look at us like we're culturally out of step with what's going on in the world.
Could be. It's an interesting. I just interviewed. The podcast won't be out till Tuesday. But an old friend of mine named Philip Stutz, who has a book out about marketing, and he's one of these people who really looks at data and consumer data. And we talked a little bit about this, and he argues that MLB made a business mistake in the sense of, I think it's something like some crazy percentage of their fan base, like 90-some%, don't want politics involved in sports to begin with. And it's a big thing for them. I feel like they're making the mistake Joe Biden didn't make. Joe Biden, when he was running, was the one guy who didn't get sucked in. Joe Biden realized who his fan base was and the majority of voters who they were, instead of listening to Twitter. And I suspect that these companies, and we'll take it away from Major League Baseball for a second, some of these other corporations, Republican policies are probably going to be better for these corporations. And, but they are, I think, pandering to Twitter. And I think it's partly has to do with like who the deciders are. People who watch MSNBC and are on Twitter all the time, sense things are different. But it feels to me like they're acting in a way that does. Remember the whole, like, what's the matter with Kansas thing, right? And the idea was that average middle America voters are voting against their own economic interest. Well, I feel like corporations are now doing the same thing.
Well, I don't agree with that. I mean, this circle is back to the premise of the Politico article today. Is the Biden team taking advantage of this rift that the corporations are having with the Republican Party right now? There's ongoing talks with the business community, which is not unusual. They're talking about having some kind of group, some kind of standard group as a liaison to the business community, which can also not unprecedented, which is a little bit of conflict with Biden's ask on the infrastructure package, which is let's jack up the corporate tax rate to 28%, and let's close a bunch of loopholes, and let's not put any increased tax burden on those making less than $400K. I imagine a lot of corporate America wants an infrastructure bill that isn't paid for by them, but they do want the infrastructure. And it makes more sense for them to connect with the Democratic Party and be seen as culturally in sync with the Democratic base, to diminish the antipathy that people on the left have for corporations, so they could try to work out that deal. So Biden could come down from 28% without making it impossible to get a final bill. And if Republicans are no longer going to be the bulwark for corporate interests, because they're much more interested in culture war themselves, then corporations might say, you know what, I'm going to get a better deal with these Democrats because we can be culturally progressive. That doesn't change our economic interest in any way. So we can virtue signal there, and then ask for a better deal on the tax rates and on the regulations.
Well, I do think it's virtue signaling, and I think it's a mistake. It's appeasement is feeding a crocodile hoping he eats you last. If they think they can buy indulgences and get a little better treatment from the left by virtue of virtue signaling, I think that's a short-term play. Like, it might work for a while, but eventually they will come for you.
Well, I don't think that's right in this case. I don't think it's a slippery slope. And I've written about this in the past, and there's some things I might want to write about it in the future. There's big business, small business divides here, and there's also differences between different industry sectors. But to speak a little broadly and crudely, a lot of big businesses don't mind regulations to a point. In fact, they like regulatory certainty. They don't want to see regulations that only they can comply with, right,
prevent upstarts from becoming competitive.
Yes. I think in the fossil fuel area, you already have the oil lobby saying we do a carbon tax. I'm sure they would want that carbon tax to be too high, but
was it Amazon or Walmart? They're rooting for the $15 minimum wage. One of those big companies.
Well, Amazon has said because Amazon is already doing 15, so why not have everybody else do it? So they're not the ones, on the high end. So there's a lot of times where businesses don't mind the regulations so long as it's not too severe. It's not designed to put them out of business. And they can be confident it's going to stick around for a long period of time so they can plan, long range. And I don't think it's antithetical to democratic interest and progressive interest to try to find those sweet spots. Now, there's also the argument that, bigness itself is bad. We should try to break up big corporations. We should want to have more small business entrepreneurship. And there's definite tensions there to the extent that you're trying to appease corporate interests with regulatory certainty. But small businesses are not huge fans of high minimum wages and extra bureaucratic paperwork to comply with regulations. So often they get small business carve-outs for some of those plans. So I think it is not delusional or counterproductive on the part of corporate interests to try to find the sweet spots with Democrats and get that certainty. But it's the kind of thing where if you lost the filibuster and people who have more of a straight majoritarian view of democracy, what's the big deal if you pass a popular thing but then politics change and then it's not popular anymore and it gets repealed and you pass it again down the line. That's what the people want, so be it. Well, people might want that in the short run, but businesses need to think long run, and individuals should think long run more often. And that kind of back and forth can be very destabilizing and not good for the overall economy. So I would like to see us not go down that path and find these compromises so the bills and the programs, the regulations are sturdy and sustainable.
I just hate businesses virtue signaling and pandering because it's not sincere. And I hate Republicans trying to, leverage the power of government to punish and target their enemies too. I just think it's bad, really bad for America on both counts. And lastly, I just want some things that are not we are too political as a country. Everything's politics. And there are people who say it has to be, man, because these issues are so important and these are moral struggles. And if you're not down with the cause, then you're part of the problem. But I say, we need a place to go to be together and not fight and not baseball used to be one of those places, by and large, where we could fight over the Yankees and the Red Sox and not whatever. So,
well, I think you got one place for that still, and that's Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, your 7 to 8 o'clock block. That's your politics-free block, if you really want that. But you can go back to the mid-19th century before there were organized sports, and politics was the sport. Politics was the entertainment. That
wasn't that a corrupt, bad time?
It did lead to the Civil War, but yeah. But there's always, you're never going to have that full separation. There's always going to be politics in the culture.
I agree, but I think the degree to which everything is political and there is no escape does matter and does contribute to the toxicity of a country.
Now, if I may segue a little bit, you had a piece about the Matt Gaetz affair, Matt Gaetz scandal.
Yes.
That also talked about hypocrisies. So Republicans being hypocritical on their treatment of corporations now. Do you see hypocrisy in how Republicans are treating the Matt Gaetz matter?
Well, the point of the article is not about how, the point of the article is that we have sort of made fetishized authenticity and transparency, right? And one thing you could say about Gaetz is, and I think you could say the same thing about Trump. I think you could say the same thing about Marjorie Taylor Greene, is that, like, they're not hypocrites. Like, Matt Gaetz is who he never pretended to be, bastion of decency or morality. I mean, Gaetz is not a hypocrite. He is who he says he is. He doesn't pretend. And I think very clearly he, like, defended Katie Hill. And I think that's part of buying indulgences as well. And providing cover. And if we don't, if we don't judge, it's the, judge not lest you be judged kind of theory. So I argue in my column that it is actually better to have hypocrites in a society than to have people who are brazenly unethical and immoral. And that, in the hierarchy of what we should aspire to, like, the best should be decent, honest, ethical, upstanding, moral politicians, right? The next level would be hypocrites who feel compelled to pretend to be decent, honest, moral, ethical people. And the worst scenario are people who, like, revel in their, sins and unethical behavior. And I think we live in a society that kind of likes transparency and honesty. And the thing that obviously would trip up Gaetz would be the allegations of trafficking a 17-year-old, right? Here's the other trend. We have no mechanisms in our society and in our politics for punishing bad behavior other than the legal system. I mean, that's why, the only thing that's going to cause Newsmax or Rudy Giuliani or Sidney Powell to behave or to change their behavior is a threat of a legal suit, right? I think the same pattern is on display here. But my larger point is, I think that we have created a society and certainly a Republican Party now that flies its freak flag, proudly. And my column argues that actually, openness, honesty, it may be great individually, but I think at the macro level, we're better off with hypocrites.
So wouldn't you rather have hypocritical, amoral corporations who are flirting with the Democratic Party than evil corporations who are in lockstep with a Trumpian Republican Party?
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, I would rather have that. But my point is, some people say, look, Matt Gaetz, it wasn't a bait and switch. It wasn't false advertising. Like, give him credit for being who he is, and I would say, I think we were better off when we had politicians like Gary Hart who pretended to be something they weren't. When Gary Hart said, follow me around, it'll be boring. He felt that there was, like, societal pressure to at least pretend to behave a certain way.
Now, I subscribe to the argument that Hart was set up and didn't actually have an affair with Donna Rice.
Oh, that's interesting. Do tell. I don't know this theory.
This came out not too long ago. And there's I'd have to dig up the article again, but there is some reporting on this. I mean, the thing about Gary Hart is, I'm going to say this while I try to find the piece. So just so people know the chronology of the so Gary Hart said, following around you'll be bored before that comment came out after people were tailing him in the Donna Rice thing. It wasn't that he said it and then people started tailing him. He was already being tailed. Now, the other thing is that the thing that he really took offense to, because he always denied Donna Rice. He always said that he didn't have an affair with her. But they got asked the blanket question, "Have you ever?" And he said, that's a bullshit question. I'm not gonna get into that. So maybe there was some transgression in his marriage before that point that he just didn't feel it appropriate to have to acknowledge. And mind you, he's still married to Lee Hart. Never got divorced. That marriage.
Wait, didn't she just pass away?
Oh, I didn't see that. She did.
This could be. Let me Google this because I wrote it. I wrote the piece before. Let me just Google Gary Hart here. Okay, everybody. The Jeopardy music. Okay. Well.
Okay, so here's so there's an article on the Atlantic 2018 by James Fallows. Was Gary Hart set up? Oh, darn you, Atlantic paid wall.
Lee Hart, wife of Senator Gary Hart, dies at 85.
Wow. Was that was recent?
Yeah, it's like 2 days ago.
Stuck by him the whole time.
Look, and here's the other point I want to make, Bill, just to make a distinction here. And this is probably where I think it ties in with the legal thing, where I think Gaetz could be in trouble. Is that, Gaetz isn't, the allegation isn't that he had an affair or that he's not even married, or I guess he's engaged now or something. But the allegation isn't that he was like promiscuous or whatever. I mean, the allegation is that there was some sort of a sugar daddy situation that allegedly involved trafficking or across state lines and paying for sex with a 17-year-old. And additionally, there's these sort of allegations of behavior such as showing pictures of naked pictures of conquest on the House floor. There's a lot of skeevy allegations there that even if you are very open-minded, let's say, and libertine, would cross the line into illegal and even Me Too violations. So it's not Gary Hart, it's a different thing.
All right, so here's part of the story. Was Gary Hart set up? So there's a Democratic operative named Raymond Strother who was friends with Lee Atwater. And Strother told The Atlantic, "I thought there was something fishy about the whole thing from the very beginning. Lee told me he had set up the whole monkey business deal." Monkey business was the boat that Hart and Rice were photographed, or he had a T-shirt. It's a monkey business. Lee told me he had set up the whole monkey business deal. I did it, he told me. I fixed Hart. After he called me that time, I thought, my God, it's true. Strother's conversation with Atwater happened in 1991. He mainly kept the news to himself. As the years went by, he discreetly mentioned the conversation to some other journalists and other colleagues, but not to Gary Hart. Crucially, he realized he had no proof and probably never would. But late last year, Strother learned that the prostate cancer he had been treated for a dozen years ago returned and spread. They might not have long enough to live. So he met with Gary Hart. Sorry, excuse me, I'm jumping around here. So he said, Hart told me, Hart asked, what does Strother make of the whole imbroglio? Ray said, why do you ask? Hart told me when I called to talk with him about the episode, and I said there were a whole list of coincidences that had been on my mind for 30 years and that a reasonable person could think none of it happened by accident. Ray replies, because you were set up. I know you were set up. I asked him how he could be so certain. Hart told me. Strother recounted his long ago talk with Atwater. According to Hart, that plan would have involved contriving an invitation from Broadhurst for Hart to come on the boat ride when Hart intended to be working on a speech, ensuring that young woman would be invited aboard. Arranging for the Broadhurst boat, Hart thought he would be boarding with some unmemorable name to be unavailable, so the court would have to switch to another boat. Monkey business. Persuading Broadhurst to forget to check in with customs clearance in Bimini before closing time, so the boat unexpectedly had to stay overnight there, and then organizing an opportunistic photo grab.
Well, I'll say two things. The thing that makes me believe it is I think Atwater would have recognized the potential for a sort of young, handsome, dashing new Democrat to be a threat to George H.W. Bush in 1988. So that part tracks. The one thing that doesn't make sense is, Atwater himself, dying of like brain cancer, recanted and apologized for a lot of stuff he did, and he never apologized for this. So that to me is a question mark.
I feel like there's some other. I'm sorry we're going on this rabbit hole, in the middle of taping. I think there was some other article about this that with some additional information that I'll try to dig it up and share on the next show. Otherwise, we'll spend all the time on. But I think there was I think someone else involved said something after that point.
So anyway, that's my take on the Gaetz Trump party. And there's this amazing quote in Vanity Fair from last September, where Gaetz was talking about how great it is to have Trump as the party head, because there were these other sort of puritanical Republican leaders, and but they were so like buttoned down, and I'm paraphrasing here, but being like a young freewheeling congressman like Gaetz is, it's so much better to have someone like Trump who doesn't have these moral tests, or whatever. If you read my piece, or if you read the Vanity Fair piece, you'll get the direct quote. But reading between the lines, Trump created a permission structure for people who didn't want to adhere to traditional standards that we have held politicians to, probably imperfectly, and in some cases, even falsely, maybe. But I do think that Trump benefited in a sense. There were people who had something to hide themselves, or something that they wanted. They wanted to have this freedom to behave with impunity, and I think they became Trump defenders out of their own self-interest.
Let me ask you. Maybe after this we should wrap things up. We had Nikki Haley say that she would back Trump if Trump ran. She wouldn't run against him. We're hearing Trump lash out at McConnell and trying to blame all sorts of things on him, and not a whole lot of complaining about Trump doing that. And we have Matt Gaetz as a huge Trump defender, not being drummed out of the party. Where does this tell you where the party is at right now?
Obviously, it's with Trump, and not only that, but they've learned nothing from January 6th. Like, January 6th hasn't just been airbrushed; it's in some cases become a rite of passage, or it's become celebrated. But there is you would think that after Trump becomes a loser, then he sabotages the 2 Senate races in Florida, giving the Democrats control of the Senate. Then he refuses to concede the election. There's an insurgency at the Capitol while they're trying to certify the election. You would think that those things would cause Republicans to be chastened, maybe to have an autopsy again, to have some second thoughts. Not at all. Not at all. It's warp speed back to Trump, full speed ahead. There is no introspection, no reflection, no cold feet. It is Trump's party, and all of those data points tell us what we already knew.
Is there anything happening in the Republican Party right now that gives you reason for optimism?
No.
Well, I guess we'll leave it on that note.
And on that happy note, follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. You should be part of these. Bill and I do a weekly chat exclusive to our Patreon supporters. And you can go to patreon.com/Bill Scher or patreon.com/Matt Lewis. Either way, you'll be invited to these weekly DM Zooms, and Bill finds any more Gary Hart info, I have a feeling that will lead our show, our DM Zoom chat on Friday.
All right. Check out my piece in the Monthly about the J&J pause, and I had a piece in the Real Clear Politics on Monday about the voting rights bill and the process of bipartisanship. Of course, you've heard me talk about this a zillion times, but throwing a little bit extra, a few more facts and figures in that piece that you may not have seen before. And I'm sure we'll have more coming out between now and the end of the week or the Monthly. So keep your eyes peeled there.
Sounds good. All right, Bill. Good to be back, and I will see you all next week.
Take care.